Hi, this is Marta, and today I show you two ways in which I sew rounded corners in pouches in bags like this one. We'll start by making a cardboard template. It helps you get smooth and symmetrical curve, and it will be easier for me to explain both methods, and it will be easier for you to adapt those two methods to your own designs later. And it's good to understand the difference between these two methods, because they both affect how the final result will look like. So let's say I want to make a pouch that's 8 by 12 centimeters. I measure that. Then I add rounded corners using template with a known radius, but you can of course also draw your curves freehand. The line we drew is our seam line, so now we have to know its length to construct the top and bottom panels. If you know the radius of your rounded rectangle, then you can calculate it, but of course we can just use measuring tape. If you're careful, there won't be much difference. My seam line is 37 centimeters long and I want my bag to be 8 centimeters deep. And because I want to have a zipper like in this blue bag at the top, then I will split this seam line into two. And again, I'm using cardboard to construct my top and bottom panels. Now I just add 1 centimeter seam allowance. Now we can just cut out our template and transfer it to the fabric. For these bags, I will just use some leftover scraps from my failed projects. It's a woven polyester fabric which has a waterproof coating, and so it's quite stiff, so it should be even harder for me to sew around rounded corners, but that's good and we will see if my methods actually work. Before sewing, I add a small notch at the center of each edge so I can align all the pieces together. Before aligning, I sew the top and bottom panels together, and I will speed this up because we're here for the rounded corners. Now that the top and bottom panels are sewn together, I can match them up with the side panel. I start by aligning at the center notches and work my way out to the corners. At the corners, you will notice like your top and bottom panels are too short for the rounded corners. But we just need to make few cuts. Making cuts will relieve the fabric and it will allow it to lay smoothly. I'm making really small cuts. I'm not touching the seam line, I'm just cutting the seam allowance. I'm a bit lazy sometimes, so I didn't draw my seam line, I just draw a little dot on my thread snips. So when I cut and I see the dot, I know I'm not cutting through the stitch line. ready to sew. I only have to watch to not cross my seam line and watch out to not stitch over these little fabric folds. They don't always happen with every fabric, but because my material is quite stiff and it doesn't want to work with me, so I have to help it a little. I just use my sewing stiletto to push the folds flat before the needle. And if this doesn't work, then I lift the pressure foot and then I try to push the fabric flat again. When I lift the pressure foot, I just make sure that my needle is down in the fabric, so my project will not move. And this is how the finished corner looks. In the second method, we measure not the actual seam line, but we measure all the way around the rectangle with seam allowances included. I've measured my rectangle with the measuring tape again, and I've got 42 centimeters, which is 5 centimeters more than the rectangle measured around the seam line. Again, I made a cardboard template and I cut out all the parts for the back from the scraps I had left. Before sewing, I of course make midpoint notches and I start aligning pieces starting from them. In this method, you will notice that when you come to the corner, you will have way too many fabric at your top and bottom panels to fit in your rounded corner, but that's perfectly fine and we will just make a little fold. In the previous method, we avoided the folds of the fabric at all costs, but in this method, we just stitch over them. We just have to remember to keep the edges of our pieces together and to keep the seam allowance. Here's the result, and you can see there are little creases on the rounded corners and the top and bottom is more bulky, but technically the seam without notches is stronger. I just choose the method depending on the project I sew or on the look I want to achieve, or if I want to have more space at the top and bottom panels. So my choice depends on many factors. You can also choose something in between these two methods, and then you will have to make less snips or less folds depending on the fabric that you use. So it's up to you which methods will work best for you and your project. Hope this video helped you decide. Thanks for watching and see you next time.